You think you know the law better than me? Officer Grant Holloway asked, his voice carrying across the hotel driveway as passing guests slowed just enough to listen. Colonel Adrian Cole stood beside a dark sedan under the pale glow of the parking garage lights, his hands visible, his expression calm. He had answered every question Grant asked. He had provided identification. He had explained that he was leaving a legal conference held inside the hotel. None of it seemed to matter. Grant had already decided what kind of man he believed was standing in front of him. Adrian looked at the officer for a long moment, then gave the faintest smile. "No, Officer Holloway." His voice was low and measured. "I will see you in court." Grant laughed once, short and dismissive. To him, it sounded like another empty threat from a man trying to sound important. He had no idea that Adrian had spent more years inside courtrooms than Grant had spent wearing a badge. He did not know that the black man standing beneath those garage lights had presided over military proceedings involving command authority, due process, official misconduct, and careers that could change with a single ruling. More importantly, Adrian had no intention of using any of that power here. Not tonight. Not on the sidewalk. If Grant wanted authority, Adrian would let him have the responsibility that came with it. The body camera on Grant's uniform was recording. A hotel security camera above the entrance was recording. A valet standing 20 feet away had stopped arranging keys and was watching every second. Adrian noticed all three. Grant noticed none of them. "Turn around and keep your hands where I can see them," Grant said. Adrian complied without argument. "Am I being formally detained?" he asked. Grant's expression tightened. "You are now." "On what specific basis?" "Suspicious activity." "What activity?" Grant stepped closer. "You really want to do this the hard way?" Adrian's smile disappeared, but his calm did not. "I want the record to be accurate." That sentence irritated Grant more than any insult could have. He was accustomed to people explaining themselves when he asked questions. Adrian kept asking him to explain his own decisions. Nearby, a hotel guest lifted a telephone and began recording. Grant glanced toward the screen, then back at Adrian. "You can tell all of this to the judge." Adrian looked at him again. There it was. The line Grant thought would end the conversation. Instead, Adrian smiled for the second time that evening. Not because he thought the situation was funny. Because Grant had just unknowingly named the one place where assumptions would finally have to sit beside evidence. "That is exactly what I plan to do," Adrian said. "See you in court." Grant shook his head and began completing the detention paperwork, confident that once the report was written, the night would belong to his version of events. Adrian stood quietly beneath the fluorescent garage lights and memorized the time, the badge number, the witnesses, and every word Grant used. He knew something Grant did not. Court was not where titles mattered most. It was where every claim eventually had to answer one simple question. What can you prove? 90 minutes earlier, Adrian Cole had been standing beneath the warm lights of a conference hall listening to a young Army captain ask a question about authority. The legal symposium had nearly ended, and most of the attendees were gathering folders, closing laptops, and exchanging quiet goodbyes near the ballroom doors. Adrian wore a dark civilian suit instead of a uniform, the only visible sign of military service being the disciplined way he carried himself. The captain waited while Adrian considered the question. "Sir, how do you know when authority has gone too far?" Adrian looked toward the emptying room before answering. "When it stops asking whether it is right and starts assuming that power makes it right." The captain nodded slowly. Adrian continued. "Procedure is not an obstacle to authority. Procedure is what keeps authority legitimate." It was the kind of answer Adrian had repeated in different forms throughout his career, not because it sounded impressive, but because he believed it. He had spent years watching talented officers make good decisions under pressure and others destroy trust by confusing confidence with certainty. In court, the difference mattered. Outside court, it mattered even more. Major Rebecca Lawson approached carrying a leather portfolio. "Colonel, your car should be waiting downstairs." Adrian checked his watch. "I told the driver I would walk to the garage." Rebecca smiled. "You know people are going to keep treating you like a civilian if you keep dressing like one. That is usually the point." She shook her head. "You enjoy making things difficult." Adrian smiled. "I enjoy learning how people behave when they do not know who they are speaking to." Rebecca paused, unsure whether he was joking. He was only half joking. Titles changed rooms. Rank changed voices. Adrian had learned long ago that sometimes the clearest measure of character came when nobody believed power was present. At 6:32 p.m., he left the conference floor and entered the hotel lobby. Evening traffic moved steadily beyond the glass doors. A light wind pushed dry leaves along the curb. Adrian stopped near the valet desk, confirmed the location of the parking structure, and walked toward the garage entrance carrying a briefcase containing nothing more dramatic than conference materials, legal notes, and a folder of case summaries. He was halfway to his sedan when he noticed a patrol car turning into the driveway. Adrian did not pay much attention. Hotels near military installations saw local police regularly. He reached his car, placed the briefcase on the trunk for a moment, and checked his telephone. One missed call from Rebecca, a message reminding him about an early meeting the next morning. Adrian smiled and typed a short reply. Behind him, a door closed. "Sir." The voice carried the practiced firmness of someone accustomed to immediate attention. Adrian turned. Officer Grant Holloway was walking toward him. Grant looked briefly at the sedan, then at the briefcase, then at Adrian. His eyes stayed there. "What are you doing back here?" Adrian glanced toward the hotel entrance. "Leaving." Grant stopped several feet away. "This your car?" "Yes." "You got identification?" Adrian looked at him for a second, then slowly reached toward his jacket. Nothing about the request was impossible to answer, but something about the speed of it told Adrian that this conversation had started before Grant ever spoke. Adrian removed his driver's license slowly and held it where Grant could see it. Grant took the card, glanced at the name, then looked past Adrian toward the sedan. "You registered to this vehicle?" Adrian nodded. "Yes." Grant looked at the license again. "What are you doing near the garage?" Adrian glanced toward the hotel entrance. "I attended a legal conference inside. I am leaving now." Grant studied him for a moment. "What kind of legal conference?" Adrian kept his tone even. "Military justice." The answer should have narrowed the situation. Instead, Grant's eyes tightened. "You military?" "Yes." "Active duty?" Adrian paused. "Officer, before we go further, what exactly was reported?" Grant shifted his weight. "We got a call about a man checking parked vehicles near this structure." "What description did the caller give?" Grant looked at him as if the question itself were inappropriate. "Male. Dark suit. Carrying a bag." Adrian glanced toward the hotel doors. Half the conference attendees leaving that evening matched some version of that description. "Race?" Grant hesitated. "That was not specified." Adrian absorbed the answer without changing expression. "Height?" Another pause. "Around 6 feet." Adrian stood just under 6 feet. "Anything about age?" "Not really." "Anything about the vehicle?" Grant handed back the license. "You always question officers this much?" Adrian slipped the card into his wallet. "Only when I am trying to understand why I am being stopped." Grant's body camera faced him from the center of his uniform. Adrian noticed the small indicator light. "Recording." "Good." Above them, a hotel camera covered the garage entrance. Across the driveway, a valet was pretending to organize claim tickets while clearly listening. 3 independent records. Adrian stored the details automatically. Grant stepped closer. "You were standing beside a car with a briefcase." Adrian looked toward the sedan. "My car. My briefcase." "That is what you say?" Adrian's voice stayed level. "You have my identification. You can confirm." "Registration. The hotel can confirm I attended the conference." "What fact currently connects me to the reported behavior?" Grant's jaw tightened. "Reasonable suspicion does not require me to explain every detail to you." Adrian nodded slightly. "No, but detention still requires articulable facts." The phrase landed differently. Grant studied him. "Where did you learn that?" Adrian almost smiled. "Experience." Grant seemed to hear arrogance where Adrian intended precision. "Keep your hands where I can see them." Adrian complied. "They already are." "Do not get smart with me." Adrian did not respond. The wind moved through the driveway, carrying the faint smell of rain from somewhere beyond the city. A car rolled slowly past the garage entrance. The valet looked up again. Grant glanced toward Adrian's briefcase. "Open it." Adrian looked at him carefully. "Are you asking for consent to search it?" Grant stared at him. "I am asking you to cooperate." "That is not the same question." The silence between them grew sharper. Grant had expected uncertainty, maybe nervousness, maybe quick compliance without questions. Instead, Adrian kept forcing every instruction into precise language. To Grant, it felt like a challenge. To Adrian, It was simply the discipline of making authority explain itself. Grant took one step back and reached toward his radio. "Stay right there." Adrian remained beside the sedan. "Am I free to leave?" Grant looked at him. "No." Adrian nodded once and glanced at the time on his watch. 6:41 p.m. The encounter had now become something more than a conversation, and Adrian knew that from this moment forward, every minute would matter. Grant kept one hand near his radio while Adrian stood beside the sedan, still and composed beneath the garage lights. "Do not move," Grant said. Adrian looked at him. "I am not moving." The answer was simple, but Grant's expression hardened, as if precision itself had become disrespect. The valet across the driveway had stopped pretending not to listen. A couple leaving the hotel slowed near the entrance. Above them, the security camera continued recording. Adrian noticed everything. Grant seemed focused only on him. "You said this is your car," Grant said. "Yes." "And that briefcase is yours?" "Yes." "Then open it." Adrian's voice remained calm. "Are you asking for consent to search my property?" Grant exhaled sharply. "I am asking you to cooperate with an investigation." Adrian held his gaze. "Cooperation does not remove the need for legal authority." Grant looked at him for a long second. "You really think you know the law better than me?" Adrian did not answer immediately. "I think the law should be clear enough that neither of us has to guess." The sentence drew a quiet reaction from the couple near the entrance. Grant glanced toward them, then back at Adrian. "Turn around." Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in concentration. "Am I being formally detained?" "Yes." "For what specific conduct?" "Suspicious activity." Adrian looked toward the hotel. "The hotel can confirm I attended the conference. Vehicle registration can confirm this is my car. Your dispatch can confirm the original description. Which fact are you relying on right now?" Grant stepped closer. "You keep acting like this is a courtroom." Adrian's expression did not change. "No, I am acting like this is a detention that may later need to be explained in one." The body camera indicator remained visible between them. Grant seemed to realize the words were being recorded, but instead of slowing down, he doubled down. "You want to argue procedure? Fine. You can explain yourself to a judge." Adrian looked at him. For the first time since the encounter began, the corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Grant mistook the expression immediately. "What is funny?" "Nothing." Adrian paused. "You just answered one of my questions." Grant frowned. "What question?" "Whether this will end with someone reviewing the facts." Grant gave a short laugh. "You can count on that." Adrian nodded. "Good." The couple near the entrance had stopped completely now. One of them raised a telephone and began recording. Grant noticed. "Keep moving." The man lowered the telephone slightly, but did not leave. Adrian turned his head just enough to see the valet, the camera, the witnesses, and the angle of Grant's body camera. He was not collecting ammunition for revenge. He was preserving memory, time, words, sequence. Grant reached for his radio and requested a records check on Adrian's identification. While waiting, he asked again, "What exactly do you do in the military?" Adrian looked at him. "Legal work. Lawyer. Something like that." Grant shook his head. "That explains the attitude." Adrian almost smiled again. "No, Officer Holloway. It explains the vocabulary." The radio crackled with a response confirming the vehicle registration and Adrian's identity. Grant heard it. The car was his. The name matched. Nothing came back suggesting criminal activity. Another exit appeared. Another chance to stop. Adrian waited. Grant looked at the sedan, then at the briefcase, then back at Adrian. "We are not done." Adrian checked the time once more. 6:46 p.m., then please document why. Grant's face tightened. The distance between reasonable suspicion and personal pride had become almost impossible to see, and Adrian understood that the next decision would determine which one was truly driving the stop. Grant stared at Adrian for several seconds after the records check confirmed the sedan belonged to him, and nothing in the response suggested criminal activity. The moment should have ended there. The original description was broad. The vehicle was registered to Adrian. His identification was valid. The hotel could verify his conference attendance. But Grant had already invested too much certainty in the stop to let facts end it cleanly. "You are still being detained," he said. Adrian's expression remained steady. "On what new basis?" Grant looked toward the briefcase. "I have not cleared that yet." Adrian followed his eyes. "You asked to search it." "I asked whether you were requesting consent." You never answered. Grant exhaled through his nose. You really enjoy making this difficult. Adrian shook his head slightly. No, I prefer clear records. The couple near the hotel entrance continued watching. The valet had stopped handling keys altogether. Grant's body camera remained fixed on Adrian. The hotel camera above the driveway captured the wider scene. Adrian knew that every second of silence was becoming part of the same record as every spoken word. Grant reached for his notepad. Name again. Adrian Cole. Military legal work. Correct. Unit. Adrian looked at him carefully. Is that relevant to the detention? Grant's jaw tightened. I am documenting who you are. Then document that you already confirmed my identity and vehicle ownership before continuing the detention. Grant looked up sharply. Do not tell me how to write my report. Adrian's voice stayed even. I am telling you what happened. Grant closed the notebook. You can tell it to the judge. There it was again, spoken with the confidence of a man who believed court was a distant place where his report would carry more weight than the moment itself. Adrian looked at him, and for the first time the tension in his face softened into a faint smile. Grant noticed immediately. What is funny now? Adrian met his eyes. Nothing is funny. He paused. I will see you in court. Grant gave a short laugh. You think that scares me? No. Adrian's answer came without hesitation. It is not meant to. The sentence seemed to unsettle Grant more than a threat would have. Adrian was not trying to intimidate him. He was simply stating where the facts would eventually be reviewed. Grant reopened his notebook. Fine. I am documenting this as an investigative detention pending clarification of suspicious activity. Adrian nodded once. Thank you. For what? For stating it clearly. Grant stared at him, then wrote again. The valet looked toward the hotel entrance as a security supervisor stepped outside, drawn by the growing attention. Adrian noticed another witness enter the scene. Grant noticed only that more people were watching. His frustration sharpened. Everyone needs to move along. The supervisor remained near the door. Officer, if this concerns activity on hotel property, we can provide camera footage immediately. Adrian did not look at Grant. He did not need to. Another exit had appeared. Another independent source. Grant glanced toward the supervisor, then back at Adrian. I will request it if I need it. Adrian checked his watch. 6:51 p.m. Please note that the hotel offered footage during the detention. Grant's pen stopped. You really cannot help yourself. Adrian's voice remained calm. I am helping the record. Grant looked at him for a long moment, then finally told him he could leave once the detention notice was completed. Adrian waited without complaint. He understood something Grant still did not. The most important part of the encounter was no longer whether he would be released. It was that Grant had been given facts, witnesses, verification, and multiple chances to stop, and had chosen to continue anyway. At 7:12 p.m., Grant Holloway returned to the precinct and began writing the report as if the encounter had been simpler than it was. Suspicious person call. Investigative detention. Subject questioned. Identity confirmed. No arrest. No incident. The words came easily because reports had a way of making uncertainty look organized after the fact. What Grant did not include was how many times Adrian had asked for the factual basis of the stop. He did not mention that the vehicle registration matched Adrian's name. He did not write that hotel staff had offered security footage before the detention ended. He did not describe the moment when his own records check returned nothing suspicious. Captain Eric Dawson walked past the desk, glanced at the screen, and stopped. Anything serious? Grant leaned back. Just a guy near the hotel acting like he was teaching a law class. Dawson looked at him. Problem? No. He was one of those military legal types. Had an answer for everything. Dawson gave a small shrug. Then why detain him? Grant's expression tightened. Because I had a call, and he matched enough of it. Dawson nodded toward the report. Body camera on. The whole time. Then make sure the report matches it. Grant looked back at the screen. It will. Across town. Adrian had already returned to the hotel conference floor to collect materials he had left with Major Rebecca Lawson. She looked up the moment he entered. What happened? Adrian placed his briefcase on a chair. Local police stopped outside the garage. Rebecca studied him. Routine. Adrian paused. It should have been. She waited. Adrian explained the sequence without exaggeration. Broad description. Vehicle ownership confirmed. Hotel footage offered. Detention continued anyway. Rebecca's expression changed when she heard the officer's name. Grant Holloway? Adrian nodded. You know him? Only through complaints I have seen referenced in liaison discussions. Adrian looked at her carefully. Referenced is not established. I know. Rebecca understood the warning immediately. Adrian never allowed rumor to become evidence simply because it fit a pattern. Did he know who you were? She asked. Adrian gave a faint smile. He knew my name. That is not what I meant. I know. Rebecca shook her head. You could have ended that encounter in 30 seconds by showing military credentials. Adrian looked toward the windows overlooking the city. That is exactly why I did not. She frowned. Why? Because if rank is the only thing that makes someone slow down and check the facts, then rank is hiding the problem. Rebecca said nothing for a moment. Adrian continued. Preserve the hotel footage. Request the dispatch audio through proper channels. Nothing informal. Nothing pressured. And the body camera? Request preservation notice only. If the officer was right, the footage will protect him. Rebecca looked at him. And if he was wrong? Adrian picked up his folder. Then the footage should protect everyone else. At 7:38 p.m., Dawson reopened Grant's report after receiving a routine records note attached to Adrian's identity. Colonel Adrian Cole, Military Judiciary. Dawson read the line twice. Then he turned toward Grant's desk. Ryan. Grant looked up. Dawson held the screen toward him. Your legal conference guy is not just military legal. Grant stood and read the entry. The confidence in his face disappeared by degrees. Military judge? Dawson nodded. Colonel. Senior Judiciary Assignment. Grant stared at the name. The words Adrian had spoken under the garage lights returned with uncomfortable clarity. See you in court. Until that moment, Grant had heard them as sarcasm. Now, for the first time, he wondered whether they had been a promise. Grant read the personnel entry a second time, then a third, as though repetition might change what it said. Colonel Adrian Cole, Senior Military Judiciary Assignment. The same man Grant had accused of trying to sound like a lawyer had spent years deciding questions of evidence, command authority, procedure, and due process. Captain Eric Dawson watched the realization settle across Grant's face. You said he never identified himself as a judge? Grant shook his head. He said he did legal work. And you never asked beyond that? I did not need his job title to conduct the stop. Dawson held his gaze. That part is true. Grant looked almost relieved until Dawson continued. Which means his title is not what matters now. Your basis for the detention is. The relief vanished. At the hotel, Adrian sat with Rebecca Lawson in a small conference office while she confirmed that the security footage had been preserved. 3 camera angles, Rebecca said. One covers the garage entrance. One covers the valet area. One has a clear view of where you were standing. Adrian nodded. Good. The hotel security supervisor is willing to provide a statement. Preserve it. Do not coach it. Rebecca gave him a look. You really think I would? No. I am reminding myself as much as you. She closed the folder. The department is going to know who you are by now. Adrian leaned back slightly. Probably. Does that change anything? It should not. Rebecca studied him. You are not angry. Adrian looked toward the dark window beside them. Anger is not evidence. He paused. And rank is not a shortcut. At the precinct, Grant was discovering exactly that. Dawson opened the body camera upload and watched the first several minutes without commentary. Grant stood beside him, arms folded. The recording captured Adrian providing identification. It captured the vehicle registration confirmation. It captured the hotel employee offering camera footage. It captured Adrian asking calm, specific questions about the legal basis for the detention. Dawson stopped the video. Your report says the subject became increasingly uncooperative. Grant pointed at the screen. He challenged everything I said. Dawson looked at him. That is not the same thing. Grant's jaw tightened. He was trying to control the encounter. Or he knew the terminology. Dawson resumed the video. They reached the moment when Grant told Adrian he could explain himself to a judge. Then came the smile. I will see you in court. Dawson paused the recording again. Grant looked away. He knew exactly what he was doing. Dawson answered quietly. So did your camera. That sentence stayed with Grant. By 8:20 p.m., a formal preservation notice had reached the department. It did not demand punishment. It did not accuse Grant of racism. It requested preservation of the dispatch audio, body camera footage, written report, and related communications pending review. Dawson read it carefully. This came through proper channels. Grant looked toward him. From Cole. requested by his legal office. So he is using his position. Dawson shook his head. No, if he were using his position, this would look very different. Across town, Rebecca asked Adrian the same question in another form. Do you want command involved? No. Do you want anyone calling the department? No. Then what do you want? Adrian answered without hesitation. The same process anyone else should get. Rebecca nodded slowly. And if the officer was right? Adrian looked at the preserved footage listed in front of him. Then the evidence should say so. And if he was wrong? Adrian's expression remained calm. Then his badge should not be allowed to speak louder than the record. Back at the precinct, Grant stared at Adrian's name on the screen. The first shock had been discovering who Adrian was. The second was realizing Adrian was refusing to use that identity as a weapon. And somehow, that made the coming review feel more serious, not less. 3 weeks later, Grant Holloway entered a county courtroom wearing the same confidence he had carried into the hotel driveway. But the room did not feel nearly as predictable. He had reviewed his report several times. He had spoken with department counsel. He had convinced himself that the stop would look reasonable once the circumstances were explained in proper order. What unsettled him was seeing Adrian Cole already seated at the opposite table in a dark civilian suit, not behind the bench, not in uniform, not surrounded by military officers. Adrian had refused any role that could create the appearance of influence. He was there as the citizen who had been detained. Nothing more. Judge Margaret Ellis entered and took her seat. Her tone was professional and neutral. We are here to review the factual basis and duration of the investigative detention involving Mr. Adrian Cole. Grant looked toward Adrian. Adrian did not return the look. Major Rebecca Lawson sat several seats behind him, observing quietly. Department counsel stood beside Grant. The first evidence presented was the dispatch audio. The caller described a man near the garage who appeared to be looking toward parked vehicles. No race was given. No specific age. No license plate. No description of Adrian's sedan. Then the hotel footage played. Adrian could be seen leaving the lobby, walking directly toward his vehicle, placing his briefcase on the trunk, and checking his telephone. Nothing in the video showed him touching another car or attempting to enter one. Grant shifted slightly in his chair. Next came the body camera footage. His own voice filled the courtroom. Questions. Adrian's answers. The identification check. Confirmation that the sedan belonged to Adrian. The hotel employee offering immediate access to security footage. Then Grant's decision to continue the detention anyway. Judge Ellis paused the recording. Officer Holloway, after ownership of the vehicle was confirmed, what specific fact caused you to continue the detention? Grant leaned toward the microphone. His behavior remained suspicious. What behavior? The courtroom became still. He kept challenging the stop. Judge Ellis looked down at her notes. By asking for the factual basis? Grant hesitated. He was argumentative. Adrian said nothing. He did not need to. The recording resumed. His voice came through the speakers, calm and exact. Are you asking for consent to search my property? Then Grant's reply. Then the hotel supervisor offering footage. The difference between the written report and the recording became harder to ignore with every minute. Grant had described resistance. The camera showed questions. He had described uncertainty about the vehicle. The records check showed confirmation. He had described an evolving investigation. The footage showed opportunities to verify that he declined to use. Judge Ellis finally turned toward Adrian. Mr. Cole, did you identify yourself as a military judge during the encounter? No, Your Honor. Why not? Adrian looked toward Grant for the first time. Because my title should not have been necessary for the facts to matter. The room stayed silent. Grant remembered the garage lights. The faint smile. The words he had dismissed. See you in court. He had imagined this moment as a contest between his badge and Adrian's rank. Instead, the rank had barely entered the case. The evidence had done the work. Judge Ellis closed the file in front of her. The question before this court is not whether Mr. Cole was important. The question is whether the detention remained supported when the available facts changed. Grant looked down at the report he had once believed would define the night. For the first time, he understood that a report was only one version of events. And in court, every version had to survive the record. Judge Margaret Ellis returned to the courtroom after a brief recess with the same measured expression she had worn throughout the hearing. Grant Holloway sat beside department counsel, hands folded in front of him, while Adrian Cole remained at the opposite table, calm and unreadable. The courtroom settled as Judge Ellis opened the file. The evidence before this court shows that the initial inquiry may have been justified by the limited information available at the time, she said. Grant looked up slightly. Then she continued. But an investigative detention cannot remain justified simply because it began that way. As new facts emerge, an officer must reassess whether reasonable suspicion still exists. Grant's shoulders tightened. Judge Ellis reviewed the sequence carefully. Adrian's identity had been confirmed. The sedan belonged to him. Hotel employees offered immediate access to security footage. The available video did not show Adrian checking other vehicles, yet the detention continued. The issue, Judge Ellis said, is not whether Officer Holloway had authority to ask questions. The issue is whether that authority remained supported after the facts changed. The ruling was clear. The continued detention had exceeded what the available circumstances reasonably supported. The matter would be forwarded to the department for administrative review, along with the body camera footage, dispatch recording, and written report. Grant stared at the table. There was no dramatic punishment from the bench. No public humiliation. No celebration from Adrian. Just a finding based on evidence. Outside the courtroom, Captain Eric Dawson waited near the hallway windows. When Grant emerged, Dawson handed him an official notice. Internal review starts Monday. You are reassigned from field duty until it is complete. Grant read the page slowly. So that is it? No, Dawson said. That is the beginning. Grant looked past him and saw Adrian walking toward the elevators with Rebecca Lawson. For a moment, pride kept him still. Then something else won. Colonel Cole. Adrian stopped and turned. Grant approached, but kept several feet between them. You knew this would happen. Adrian shook his head. No, Grant frowned. You are a judge. You knew how the court would see it. I knew what the evidence showed. That is different. Grant looked toward the courtroom doors. When you said you would see me in court, I thought you were threatening me. Adrian's expression softened slightly. Court was never where I planned to defeat you. Grant looked back at him. Adrian continued. It was where the facts finally got the same authority you gave yourself. Grant had no immediate response. For 16 years, he had trusted instinct because instinct had often kept him alert and decisive. But somewhere along the way, he had started treating instinct as proof. Adrian did not ask him to apologize. He did not demand that Grant lose his career. He only said, if you remember anything from that night, remember this. Authority does not become weaker when it checks itself. It becomes legitimate. Grant lowered his eyes. Weeks later, the department completed its review. Grant received formal discipline and mandatory retraining on investigative detention, report accuracy, and bias awareness. Several earlier complaints were reopened, not because Adrian demanded it, but because the review revealed patterns worth examining. Some were substantiated. Others were not. Each was judged on evidence. Adrian returned to his courtroom and never mentioned Grant's name from the bench. But the lesson remained. Grant had thought power meant being the person who could stop someone and demand answers. Adrian understood something harder. Real power begins when the person wearing authority is willing to answer for how it was used.